Well, it's officially afternoon, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our 7th weekly financial meeting. Today we have special guest Shivani Dubey, who's the Phoenix Deputy Director, and Mara Wells, a Business Opportunity Specialist, both representing the SBA. So before we get started, just some housekeeping items. If you hover at the bottom of your screen, you can mute your audio and stop video if you don't want to be part of this presentation, as it will be recorded and posted to the ground ambulance website. So everything that is seen and everything in the chat box is part of that recording. So just a brief reminder about that. So if for some reason you don't want to be recorded, go ahead and hover your mouse there in the center, stop your audio, and you can stop your video as well. So please mute yourself while we are listening to the presentation, and Shelley will be presenting all materials for us. So for our presenters, there's no need to screen share. She's got everything for you. Feel free to cue her to go forward or backwards on whatever slides that we have. So let's go ahead and get started. So as you know, I am Catherine Ruiz. I am the Bureau Rate Analyst for the Department of Health, the Bureau of EMS and Trauma. And as I said, we have the Phoenix Deputy Director, Shivani Dubey, and Mara Wells, the Business Opportunity Specialist, who's going to be talking today regarding the different programs that they have for our providers. I have a few changes to the agenda. This week, I did not send multiple emails of updates regarding the agenda since I did that so much last week. I apologize for that again. So the updates that I wanted to provide, which will be on the version that's uploaded to our ground ambulance website, is regarding the next stimulus bill that's going to be coming out. So currently it is in the US Senate. They are working on what funding is going to be made available. I know there's lots of different funding opportunities that providers have expressed they wish had been made available to them. And let's hope that the current bill that's being worked on by the Senate will address some of those concerns. The second thing I wanted to update on is CMS updated their FAQ on their webpage regarding changes for and updates regarding telehealth, face-to-face exams for mobility devices, oxygen for patients, hospice care, and tumor treatment. So if that's something that falls in your realm, that's something that you might want to check out. I will be listing that link on the agenda, which will be uploaded later today. Those are the only updates that I have. So with that, let me go ahead and hand it off to our special guest presenters, if you please.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate it. And this is Shivani Dubey from the SBA Arizona District Office. Thank you so much for having Mara and I on today. We are going to, well, I'm going to talk to you today about the SBA and the programs and resources available. We've done, we've kind of been doing a lot of things in a dynamic environment similar to you guys. So first I want to say thank you for all of your services and everything you're doing for helping the healthcare environment, and everything in your industry is very crucial right now. So we really appreciate everything you guys are doing. And thank you for having us on today. So today I'm going to talk to you about a few things, and the topics are a little bit all over the map because there's a lot of things going on, but SBA is responsible for many different things, including access to capital related to loans and the loans that you're commonly hearing about right now, which is the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So real quickly, I'm going to give you a brief update on what's going on with those loans and loan programs, and then we're going to talk on a separate topic related to federal contracting. So the federal government is the biggest buyer in the world, and we want to make sure that you're aware of different programs and certifications that are eligible, that you may be eligible for, in order to then pursue different buying activities, such as the federal government for the services that you provide. So we'll get into those mechanics and some of the details around certifications, and we'll go from there. So before we get into the slide deck, I'm just going to provide you a brief update on the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program, as well as SBA's disaster loan program. So as of May 31st, we've got 734,797 loans approved in the Arizona market. So that's our, sorry, I apologize, nationally for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So that's SBA's disaster loan program. Currently the disaster loan program, the EIDL loan, if you didn't already apply before April 15th, it's been closed since then unless you're an agricultural business. So if you've already applied and you're in the queue for getting that loan, we're still working through that loan processing piece. So you're not you haven't missed it. It's just a matter of we are going through the loans as we get to them, first come, first serve. So unless you're an agricultural business, you can't apply now. However, if you've already applied in the past, then it is something that we are getting through the processing for. So that's something to mention on the SBA disaster loan. That's the update there. In Arizona alone, we've got 13,742 EIDL loans that have been approved, and that's over $1 billion of lending, so of disaster loans. So the disaster loan is something that is not forgiven, meaning it's an actual loan with an interest rate and you pay it back. So that's something that is out there for you. And if you're an agricultural business, which in this environment, I don't believe anyone will qualify for it. But if you, that's who it's open for right now. On the paycheck protection side, that loan in Arizona, we've got 74,000 or so loans approved, which is about $8.4 billion of PPP loan lending. So that's our Arizona sort of marketplace as far as what's happening. There's still money available in the Paycheck Protection Program. Last I checked, I think it was about $75 billion are left. We've allocated a $10 billion set aside for community development financial institutions. So if there is still interest in this loan, it's available. It's not the same level of a line or a wait that it used to be. Now we're pretty much processed and all caught up. As of yesterday, the Senate signed and the House, the Congress has approved a revision to the PPP program under the Statute Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. And that is basically looking at giving an extension on the 8 weeks to make it up to 24 weeks, along with a few other details around forgiveness that are going to change the program. It hasn't gotten to the president for signature yet, so it's not enacted into law just yet, but it does appear to be coming. So while we can't speculate on it, it's very close to being signed. So stay tuned for that. And as I've told Kat, when we get more clear forgiveness guidance, we are happy to come back on for those that have applied for PPP or have a PPP loan and try to give you a little bit more guidance on what's changed and how it might impact you. So with that, we're going to get into the slide deck. Shelly, if you don't mind pulling up the, and we're going to go rather quickly on this because this was a much larger slide deck and it still looks rather large at 44 slides, but it's we're going to go through it pretty quickly so that you get a general sense for whether federal contracting is for you, whether it's something you want to get into, whether it's something we know what we've had in the past. We've had some of your ambulance providers and service providers that are in our federal contracting world. For example, the ADay program, they've been certified to do work, and so they've been done ambulance work at the Indian Health Service or some of the other remote hospitals. So the federal government buys these services just like all the other folks do. So it's one of those things where if it's something that's of interest, you do want to make sure that you understand whether it's a marketplace that you want to get into and then how to get into it. So next slide, please. And then next slide, please. So the first question is related to whether your business is a small business. And we have some parameters on how we define small, and it's usually defined off of a size standard based on your industry code. So in this environment, you would want to make sure that you're small, but most likely everybody is a small provider. And you are restricted by size parameters for all of the programs we're going to talk about today. And you must be a for-profit business in this environment for small business defining government contracting. Next slide, please. Another key piece to recognize is the federal government is a large buyer. We're a large buyer, so we buy large amounts of things. So when we buy things, the contract sizes that we look at, $1 million contract is a small to average size contract for us. So when you look at, very small purchases, we're looking at a couple $1,000s. But when you look at larger size contracts for full scale services, maybe on an Army base or a military base or facility, those tend to run in the tens of millions or $1 million or above. And so you want to make sure that you've got the working capital and you have the business plan that can help to fulfill those services, because the last thing you want is to have a contract in your hand and not know how you're going to finance it or not know if you have the capacity to fulfill the contract, because the government will ultimately ask you if you can do it. If you meet the qualifications and criteria, then you are essentially held to completing those services on our behalf. Next slide, please. And so we do buy at, $500 billion of goods and services annually. We have a requirement to meet small business goals. So the federal government, we negotiate out goals with different federal activities in the beginning of the fiscal year, and our fiscal year starts on October 1. And we basically will have these targets that these Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, all these folks have a certain target that they're trying to meet. When they try to meet that target, they are, excuse me, sorry about that. Working from home has all its challenges. Thank you for understanding. We look to make sure that we have small business participation in the type of buying that we're doing. So when we have buying for these large scale contracts, we try to ensure that small businesses are included in that setup. So there could be full and open contracts where people from the largest pool of competition, large and small businesses, are able to get those contracts. Sometimes they're set aside for small businesses, and sometimes they're set aside for different types of small businesses. Or they can be sole source depending on, and that means that you can give a contract directly without competition. We always encourage competition for contracts to get the best pricing for the government. So, but in order to win those contracts, you want to be in the smallest pool possible in order to maximize your opportunity and the ability to win a contract. Next slide, please. Okay, so the socioeconomic category type. So oftentimes we get the question about whether you fit into the category, and am I a small business? Am I this? Am I that? And how does that benefit you? So large businesses, as well as the federal government, you can take advantage of how your demographic looks in order to meet some of these requirements without even really being fully aware of it. And it oftentimes will help large scale buyers. For example, the hospital has supplier diversity goals. The federal government has supplier diversity goals. So when they go into these kind of things, if you happen to meet these criteria and you're a business owner and you have your own business that will allow you to meet this requirement, by all means, it doesn't hurt to do it. It's free to do. And you may find yourself in a situation that benefits you without really recognizing you stepped into that benefit. So I encourage take a look at these categories, and we'll talk about what allows you to qualify into them so you can see whether or not this is something that would work for you. We do have set aside, so we have that overall 23% of money from the federal government buying is trying to go to small business. Within that, we have sort of the subset: women-owned small businesses, small disadvantaged businesses, HUBZone businesses, and ServiceDisabled veteran-owned small businesses. So those all have different percentage points that we look at. But ultimately, if you can qualify for one or more than one, we get to take credit for all of the different category types you may fit into. Next slide, please. Recently, during all the COVID time right now, we've got some contracting flexibility. So the contracting arena is complex, and it has a lot of different acquisition rules about how we buy things, and it's probably not that different than how the state, buying power works. And it's, we've got our federal acquisition regulation and all the different provisions around it. Currently, we have emergency procurement flexibilities. So we do have the ability to, if you're buying goods and services from folks like your state, from you guys, we would be able to increase what we normally can do with our normal buying power to higher thresholds and still use sort of simplified ways of buying, because we want to be able to make it easier to support the COVID recovery and the COVID requirements. So those are things that are available and readily available, and you'll get the slide deck afterwards, so you can always look it up if you need more information. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to go into the mechanics of every sort of number or detail threshold, because unless, right now we're trying to establish whether this marketplace in the federal environment is something that is a good fit. And as you further yourself down that path, then we can get you connected to the right places. Again, knowing your marketplace, which you all do, and understanding if we buy those kind of services, which we all do. And so it's a matter of, knowing that, is this the right environment, and can you expand your business model to potentially get you into a new contracting area that you normally hadn't considered. So that's something to look into given this environment. Next slide, please. And with all the needs related to hospital, ambulance, hospital care, all those things, it's not a bad time to consider branching out. If you were looking at it, it's not a bad time to consider that. So to get started, the next question that comes up is, so what do I need to do to be registered or to get started in this government contracting space? You recognize this is something you may be interested in, this is something you may want to pursue, and what do we need to do next? So you have to be registered. We have one version of a yellow pages, and that's basically sam.gov. And sam.gov is basically the system for award management. Every vendor that is registered to do business with the federal government has to be registered in the system. So you go ahead and get yourself a DUNS number, which is just an identifier number. And to do that, you would get the identifier number for free by calling the number or going on to sam.gov. Once you register for it, it will give you the information that you need. 1 second. Next slide, please. So the other piece that I would recommend is that while we're currently in this COVID environment, you want to also make sure you're registered in the Disaster Response Registry, which is coming off of sam.gov. So the sam.gov site, you'll have a subset where you register for disaster-related response recovery. So in this event where, let's say, the CDC or CMS or someone is looking to hire services in the local market, Indian Health Service, for example, they can go onto the disaster registry and find that you are a disaster responder. It's important to do that because then they can reach out much cleaner and quicker to get to you for your services. We won't know you're there unless you register yourself, so you have to make sure that you go in and put your profile in accordingly. Next slide, please. And so again, you opt in to the disaster response registry and you'll make sure that that's there. And then when contracting officers, it's like the yellow pages for the contracting community in the sense that if they want to reach out and find you, we have to look in SAM. So they look in SAM, they find you, the government looks in SAM, and they find your information and they can reach out and contract with you accordingly. Next slide, please. So I want to, I oversimplified the process here, but I want to make sure you understand that there's other opportunities to get assistance to kind of proceed down this path. So the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers are specifically designed around helping with the very questions that you might run across in terms of a solicitation. How do I understand what I'm looking at? What do I do to be able to get into this marketplace? How do I register? What does this number mean? What is the cage code? All these kind of questions that you're going to come across. I definitely encourage you to reach out to them, and the information for them is in this presentation deck as well. But they are free resource services. They're counseling services that can do virtual counseling appointments with you to see if this is a good fit and how to proceed. We also have all these other links and things that you can kind of get into if you want to do some pre-work just to kind of see. But I do recommend your first stop be the PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, as once you get talking to them, it's a much easier way to understand what to do next. Next slide, please. Okay, so as far as the different things that are on the street right now, if the federal government is looking to buy PPE or medical supplies or anything related to the needs for COVID and COVID recovery, we are purchasing it through the FEMA solicitation that's currently out on sam.gov. So you'll be able to find that, and the link is here, but ultimately that's where we find our supplies and services, things related. So if that's something that you sell, you sell gloves, you sell, something that we may need for masks or other things, that's where we're going to procure those items. And so and again, the transportation needs is under this other link, the FEMA Tender of Service Program. Next slide, please. The Army Corps is also doing some things because they're standing up different tents and medical units, temporary facilities, those sorts of things. So you can find those opportunities off of this link as well. Next slide, please. So that's kind of the overview of what is government contracting. Will it maybe be for you? I want to quickly get into some of the details around the certification types. So then you understand, well, now that you know the answer to question 1, what do you fit into and how might it benefit you? Next slide, please. So first, we're going to briefly talk about the ADay Business Development Program. This is a program that's a 9-year program, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime program. So once you do it once, you can't come in again. In Arizona, we have about 85 certified ADay participants, and they're all over the map. It could be services, an ambulance provider. So it's been tried and true. He did very well in the program, and it was something that worked. And he was our only one, and he has been our only one since then. So I don't, discourage you from doing it. I think it's a great program for you guys too. And as you get into the program, it's designed around social and economic disadvantage. So in order to qualify, you have to be essentially, there's ethnicity qualifications, and you have to be economically disadvantaged, which is qualified by having a personal net worth of less than $250,000, and we don't include your business equity for that portion of the calculation. Next slide, please. Big benefits around, so the ownership and requirements and the different pieces, there's a whole host of eligibility criteria, but again, the main ones are around social and economic disadvantage. And that can be defined by, like I said, there's a set group of people that qualify as socially disadvantaged. There's an economic disadvantage threshold number, meaning the dollar figure. We look to make sure you do have to be in business for 2 years, because this program, as you're going to hear, has a lot of different complexities to it. So we want to make sure the business is fairly established before you get qualified. You can waive the 2-year requirement by having enough technical and management experience, but you'd have to do a narrative to support that waiver. So, and you have to be the fully 100%, well, no, sorry, you have to be the majority owner in order to be qualifiable under the ADay program. So for all of these programs, you have to have the majority ownership be fitting the criteria that we're talking about. So if you have a 49% owner who doesn't meet the criteria, that's okay, but your 51% owner does. And you can't have, in this program, you can't have other jobs. You have to have this be your main occupation. Next slide, please. So in order to apply, we have to do the SAM application, or the registration in SAM, to be a vendor that is in the system, period. Then you have to apply online at certify.sba.gov. I highly recommend you reach out to a PTAC counselor to help you through the process, because there's a lot of information we have to get. For this program, we have to really know all the ins and outs of your company, your structure, anybody else you might be working with, how long you've owned it for, your own personal financial stuff, because we have to make sure you're economically disadvantaged, your business's information, all the things related to the financial statements and tax returns. So it's a whole host of information, and it's a 9-year program that we're pretty much hand in hand with you on. So in order to qualify for it, we have to look at everything, and every year we'll make sure that you continue to be certifiable in the program. Next slide, please. And again, there's a bunch of things that are on a checklist that you can make sure you have. You can apply. It takes the time frame to apply and get in. It can be anywhere between 3 months, 6 months, depends on how complex your application is or what kind of deficiencies it might have. So we work, we only get you into the program here locally once you apply online and are approved through our Washington, D.C. office. So that's kind of the procedural side of it. Next slide, please. So the next program is the HUBZone program. HUBZone stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. This program is really designed around the place of your business. So it's kind of gearing around that underserved market concept, where you have a location that your principal office is located in, and you're hiring people from an underserved market that meet a HUBZone definition. 35% of your employees must be living in a HUBZone. Your principal office must be in the HUBZone, and that would qualify you to be a HUBZone company. So the idea here is that we're trying to allow you to bring economic stimulation back into your own community, or the community where your business is located. And as a result, you would get federal government benefits. I want to just one thing to say about the ADay program, which I didn't mention. The big benefit around the ADay program, other than a 9-year business development term, is that you can get contracts from the federal government directly awarded without competition up to $4 million for service-based contracts. So what that means is if the Indian Health Service has a $2 million contract for hospital transport and helicopter, rescue, whatever it might be, they can do that without telling anyone else other than the SBA, because we award that with you, and they would be able to do that within a very short time frame with a very easy, you would negotiate out your final price point with the Indian Health Service. But ultimately that contract award, the whole process is a little bit more simplified, which is what makes it attractive for folks, and the fact that they don't have to go through a long acquisition process where they have to compete and potentially review 30 different solicitations and all the different bids. So big selling point around that one is around that. In the HUBZone environment, you can't do, next slide, please. You can't necessarily do a direct award like I just mentioned, but you can do set aside. So when you go into our SAM.gov system, you can look for contracting opportunities that are currently on the street. So as you decide whether this is for you or not, you can see if there's opportunities available by reviewing and searching on the type of service you provide and the location which you're providing it in, and seeing if there's any opportunities available. Because oftentimes what you find is that, maybe it's not a market that has a strong need, or oftentimes you're like, wow, there's a HUBZone set aside for this job. What does that mean? What that means is the only people that are going to be allowed to bid on that job have to be HUBZone certified. So if they're HUBZone certified, they can bid on the job, but just by the sheer numbers, if you look at the number of businesses out there in the 30 million small businesses kind of number, and then you look at how many are certified for ADay or HUBZone, the numbers are much smaller. In the ADay national environment, we have about 5,000 or less certified ADay firms. So when you compete with that few people, it might seem like a lot, but then, that's nationally. So if you bring it down to your own market and how many people might actually bid on this, you have a much better fighting chance at winning some of these substantially sized contracts. The HUBZone eligibility requirements, as I mentioned, the principal office has to be located in the HUBZone. Census tract and Bureau of Economic Statistics, some of these things are the drivers around what defines a HUBZone. So you can look on our website, sba.gov/HUBZone, and the map is going to give you the detail about whether you're in a HUBZone. And then if you're 1 or 2 person owned business, you can, if you live in a HUBZone and you're working in that HUBZone and your office is your home, then ultimately you would qualify. So, take a look at it and see if it works for you, and then apply and see if it, if it's something that would be beneficial. Next slide, please. There's some things that we've done with the HUBZone program to allow some additional flexibilities during the COVID timeframe. So we're changing some of the way we've defined the 35% of your employees have to be in a HUBZone. So if you've got some different nuances to your business that you're not sure, maybe you're not HUBZone normally, but you might be HUBZone right now, for sure, take a look at the flexibilities or reach out to us and we can talk to you more about those as well. Next slide, please. We also have the ability, if there's a contract pending that you are looking at for HUBZone, and if the HUBZone program certification would help you, we can potentially expedite your application to make sure that it gets done in a little bit faster environment. If you've applied in January, or when you apply after January this year, which is a few months ago, we are looking at a 90-day turnaround for applications submitted. So we're trying to make sure that we stick with that timeline for how long it takes to get certified in the HUBZone program. Next slide, please. If you need any help related to the HUBZone program, we've got some help desks and help emails, hubzone@sba.gov, or they do a weekly conference call where you can ask some questions about your eligibility or potential eligibility. Next slide, please. The next program we're going to talk about is, as I mentioned with the ADay program, you have the ability to do set-asides. If the contract is over $4 million, you can set it aside and compete amongst other ADay firms. In the HUBZone program, you don't have the direct authority to sole source that easily. However, you can do set-asides for HUBZone. So as I mentioned, you're bringing the numbers down to improve your competition capacity. The WASB program, the Women-Owned Small Business Program, this is something that's going through a little bit of a change right now, but I'm going to mention it and then I'll talk about the change. Also helps people satisfy their contracting goals. So if you've got a goal related to your program, well, if the federal government has a goal around WASB, which it does, then your certification will help us meet that goal. So there's set-asides for WASB and economic disadvantaged women-owned, which is EdWASB, and those set-asides are also going to limit competition for the type of work that we might be trying to buy for. Next slide, please. The basic parameter being the ownership requirement, 51% of the ownership needs to be woman-owned. The woman-owned business owner has to be the highest officer position. And there's some NAICS codes that you have to be in order to qualify. A NAICS code is an identifying code called the North American Industrial Classification Code. And that basically is like a 6-digit number that lets you, identifies your industry basically. So when you're in that industry space, there's some industries that are allowed for set-asides and some that are not. So you want to take a look and make sure that your industry is allowable under the set-aside option. Next slide, please. So in the contracting community, when we have we do a lot of market research before we put something on the street for a contract to be let. So when we're doing those contracting pieces, there's a decent amount, we do market research. When we do the market research, we have to see, are there more than one business in this type of set-aside? If we have 2 qualifying businesses that hit one of these set-aside types, a contracting officer can essentially set it aside to be WASB, HUBZone, ADay. They can do those type of things because they know that the marketplace can be responsive. So the other type of set-aside within the WASB environment is this EDWSB, Economic Disadvantaged Woman-Owned Small Business. This one essentially looks at it has an asset requirement as well, net worth requirement. And if you qualify for WASB, you may not necessarily qualify for EDWSB, but you may, depending on your economic status, your situation. So that's one of those calculations that we'll do, and you could potentially qualify for more work and get it a little easier. Next slide, please. The eligibility process for this is to register in SAM like everything else, and then you have to register yourself in certify.sba.gov. This process is effectively changing on July 15th. So we used to keep it so that you could go in and certify yourself. Now we've changed it so that you have to certify through the SBA in order to count your status. So ADay requires SBA's sort of stamp of approval. HUBZone also requires that stamp of approval. Currently, the WASB program does not, but after July 15th, we're moving into the process where we are going to require you to get that stamp of approval, not just your own self-certification. So that's going to change between July 15th and October 15th when it'll become effective. So just kind of be aware, if it's something you've already done, it's going to need to be updated in order to keep it current. Next slide, please. Again, same portal for ADay and WASB. It's a different mechanism for applying to HUBZone. Eventually, they'll all be on the same system, but we're still not quite there yet. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. Thank you. And then as far as I mentioned, the timeline changes, we are making that change between July 15th and October 15th in order to not allow for self-certifying. If you're trying to compete on one of these WASB set-asides, you would need to have SBA certification prior to being able to be considered a WASB company. So just to mention the change that's coming. Next slide, please. I kind of mentioned this already, where if you've got 2 businesses that can give you a reasonable price, the contracting community is allowed to set it aside accordingly. So, there's the marketing where you want to market yourself through SAM, but there's also the sam.gov, but there's also the ability to make sure that even if your profile is just sitting in the sam.gov system, contracting community is usually out there looking to see, because if they can't find someone, then they're forced to go to the next sort of bigger category group. So they would say, okay, well, if I can't find any, I might not be meeting my WASB goals, so maybe I want to do a WASB set aside, but I don't have enough WASB companies to do that, so I'm going to have to, maybe I'll go HUBZone, or maybe I'll go ADay, or maybe I can't find any of those and I'll just have to go full and open. And that means anyone can bid on it, large and small business. Next slide, please. Okay, so everything in the WASB environment is changing coming up here. So sba.gov/WASB ready is what I recommend for you to just sort of check out if there's anything new that you feel like you need to know or you're not quite sure. You can always reach out to us or the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Yesterday, we just did a full briefing for over 300 people related to the WASB changes and what we're talking about today. So if you need any of these webinars or things, we're happy to send those out your way as well. Next slide, please. Then the last program dealing with certification per se is the ServiceDisabled VeteranOwned Small Business Program. So this one is not one that's in-house in SBA, essentially. It's self-certifying unless you're working with the VA. If you're working with the VA, then you have to be established through their system called CVE or vetbiz.gov. And they would be ones giving you the stamp of approval, similar to how SBA is doing it for ADay, HUBZone, and soon WASB. So the qualification, next slide, please. The qualification around this program is that the 51% owner needs to be service disabled veteran-owned. Veteran-owned on their own will not qualify you for this certification. You don't necessarily have to have a disability percentage assigned to you. However, you do need the letter from the VA claiming that you've claimed the disability. So there's some forms and things that you have to have in possession, but we don't make you upload those things or prove those things to anyone. Next slide, please. So the Service Disabled Veteran Program also has set-asides available, and ultimately, same as all the other ones, you know, if you get certified in one or more of these category areas, it may help you out when the government or a large buyer or anyone really is trying to contract with you, because as they contract with you, they get to take credit. And not everybody there's different sort of avenues of buying. So sometimes the ones we deal with that are the end user is not aware of the buying programs and some of the buying power that you're creating with your certification. So just, I don't ever discourage these certifications because they don't hurt you. The one that has a sort of time limiter on it is ADay. So before you decide to go ADay, that one you want to be sort of smartly positioned for because it is a 9-year term with caps on the front and back end. The other ones you can apply for, and whether they do something for you or they don't, they're not going to hurt you. I do want to mention sort of the small business, the All Small Men Are Protege program and joint ventures. If you're looking to grow your capacity, if you have a large business that you work with that potentially is somebody that you want to do a mentor protege with and someone that's been helping you out, you can get to a point where you can build your capacity through these programs. Next slide, please. In a small, quick nutshell, the Mentor Protege program is an umbrella agreement that allows you to mentor, have a large business mentor, and still be considered small for the purposes of contracting. So you could say, you know, I'm just going to give an example as a large business. And this is not really industry specific to your industry, but let's say it's like a Raytheon. Raytheon is a large business. They could be a mentor to a smaller company. They could do a joint venture with this smaller company and still be considered small, even though Raytheon is your mentor. And the reason for that is that is the benefit of the Mentor Protege program is in exchange for allowing sharing of information and training between the large and small business, we allow the large business to essentially be small when they do joint ventures with that small business. So it's expanding the buying power of the large business, allowing for the small business to gain capacity and growth and learning from that large business at the same time. Real quickly, I want to go through some of the resource partners that we have out. I know it sounds like a jungle over here. I don't know how to make them quieter, but I have 2 small children, so I thank you for your patience while they scream in the background. Hopefully you can't hear them too much. It's an active day around here.
I dig it. I just want to interrupt to say that I dig it. It just kind of reminds me of normalcy, so I like that. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Pat, I appreciate it. I know normally they're not that loud, but today for some reason they must know I'm on a webinar with all of you. So
they're having a great day, and I love it.
They want to share their joy while they're running around while we're learning something. So there we go. Thank you for that. So the resource partners, we've got SCORE, we've got the Small Business Development Center, these guys are all positioned for virtual counseling right now, and they're free resources to you. I definitely encourage take advantage. I know this is a hard time for small business owners and in your industry and others, you know, whether you're busier because of all the things happening with COVID, or whether you're needing to change your model a little bit, or take advantage of opportunities that may not have been there in the last year. This is a good time to do that, because all those folks that are counselors are experts in that, and they're neutral voices for you, meaning they're not in it as a consultant. They're paid by federal resources as well as public-private partnership, and they don't take money from you to be free counseling to you. So next slide, please. Just like we have those resource partners, we also have the Veteran Business Opportunity, Arizona Veteran Business Outreach Center, VBOC. They are also available for those kind of counseling services, as well as the Women's Business Center. And we have one Women's Business Center that are down in Tucson, and they are affiliated with the YWCA. Next slide, please. And then here's the PTAC information. I know I've referenced them a few times, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. If procurement technical assistance or procurement assistance is what you're looking for because you're trying to embark in this government contracting space, these folks are excellent, and they are a great starting point. And you know, they will stick with you, and they're also free services. They'll stick with you to make sure that you're aware of what you need to succeed in the federal marketplace. Next slide, please. We briefly talked about some of the things related to disaster relief up front, but just to remind you or touch on it again before we close out here. Next slide, please. There's things that we have on our website related to coronavirus relief. So sba.gov/coronavirus. We've got things around our debt relief programs. We have the information about the Paycheck Protection Program. We've got the pieces for the figuring out how to access your resource partner network, meaning the one that's in Arizona or one closest to you. We have 10 small business development centers throughout the state. So if you're looking for a counseling location closer to you, you can find that as well if you're not right here in the Metro Phoenix area. Next slide, please. As we kind of mentioned this already, where we've got funds left in PPP. And so if you're interested or looking at that program still, please do take advantage of the PPP loan. And if it's going to help you, as I said, the rules are changing. So we're looking at a potential for, a longer period of time, different ways to measure forgiveness. So do be in touch with us and a lender that you are comfortable with to do that loan, because it could very well help you out to bridge you over this crisis timeframe. Next slide, please. And this one, the Paycheck Protection Program, is really designed around payroll and paying either yourself or employees. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're really not looking at other expenses. And as I mentioned, I left the slide in here in case you did apply to the EIDL loan already. Currently, like I said, it's not available anymore unless you're agricultural business. But initially, if you applied to the EIDL loan, we did an EIDL advance, which was going to give you up to $10,000 depending on how many employees you have. So if you were just you, and you applied for an EIDL loan, you probably got the $1,000 EIDL advance grant, essentially, and that's not to be paid back. That's not part of the loan. The loan itself is under a 3.75% term for for-profit businesses and a 2.75% term interest rate for nonprofits. So, and that one is over a 30-year term. So it's a really good loan. It doesn't have to be just around payroll. It can be used for working capital needs and other expenses. So that one is a much more a broader loan that you can get. Next slide, please. And then this is our little feedback slide, sba.gov/feedback. If you want to let us know how we're doing, or if you have any feedback for us, you can always send it to us as well. But this is a little QR code and link that you can use. Next slide, please. And then we've got our information. This is myself, Shivani Dubey. I'm the Deputy Director at the Arizona District Office. We have 13 staff members in Arizona. 2 in Tucson, 1 in Show Low, and the rest are in Phoenix. And so we're available. We have Mara Wells, who's on the phone with me today, business opportunity specialist. Jordan Ripley is also a business opportunity specialist. We all focus in the contracting area. And if you've got questions or concerns, or just want a little bit of clarification, you are more than welcome to email us or contact us. We are currently going through an office move as well, so phone numbers are a little trickier right now, but email is a great way to reach out, and then we will be in touch. But I do want to thank Kat and her team today. Thank you so much for having us on, and it's been a pleasure to be in touch through this dynamic time, and I appreciate your flexibility, as we're not sure what the new day is going to bring. As I sat at my sofa last night and I see the Senate sign the bill, and I said, oh, here we go on another roller coaster. So thank you everyone for your time and attention today, and I'm going to turn it back to Kat and see if we have any questions that anyone wants to bring to the table.
And you can *6 unmute yourself if you have any questions regarding any of these programs. So if you've got any, I welcome you to do that, or utilize the chat box. I guess that's a no. You definitely got to thank you, Shivani, from Shelley, our presenter, and I'd like to echo that. Yeah, thank you so very much. If you have no questions at this time, the only other comments that I have is just a brief reminder that all the agendas, funding opportunities, and previous presentations are available on the Ground Ambulance website. And N95 mass decontamination is being offered for free through November. So you've got some links there that you can get involved in that if necessary, or if that would be helpful to your program. Of course, there's the COVID EMS 911 resource page, COVID pages that have been translated to Spanish, and then of course the email address if you have any COVID specific questions. So thank you so very much to everybody. Thank you to Shivani, and thank you so very much to Mara, and thank you so much, Shelley. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you all next week, hopefully, and if we have a presentation. And of course, Shivani, you said if we can have another presentation once the PPP has been finalized.
Of course, you know where to find me.
Yes, definitely will. Thank you so very much to everybody. Have a great weekend.